Story 1. The Sandy Ravage. It was the spring of 2007. My then boyfriend and I were on our way from New York down to Miami to go to a music festival. We were driving south on the highway along the east coast of Central Florida when we pulled into a rest area so that he could catch a nap. He had been driving all day when he decided that he desperately needed a short rest before getting back behind the wheel. We had very recently bought the van, and he did not think that I could handle maneuvering it, so he was doing all of the driving. I later proved him wrong. He parked and jumped in the back of the van and laid down on the futon mattress that we had laid there. He told me to leave him alone, and he proceeded to pass out from exhaustion. I was pretty freaked out because the rest area building was unmanned, locked up, and dark inside. The restrooms were closed. The small rest area building was surrounded by dark woods. There were about 4 other cars in the small parking lot, but no sign of any drivers, so I imagined they were having an emergency laydown as well. Normally, I would never have set foot outside of the van alone in such a scenario. My instincts told me not to get out of the van. But I had taken some Midol for my menstrual cramps, and they had given me brutal nausea. I needed some pretzels. I mustered up all of my courage and opened the passenger side door and squeezed through the space between our vehicle and the vehicle that was parked directly next to ours. As soon as I had a clear line of sight to the front of the rest stop building, I saw the thing, saw it, clearly. Straight ahead I saw the brightly lit front facade of the rest stop. To the left of the doors was IT, to the right of the doors was a vending machine. Immediately, it communicated with me. I was flooded with what I consider a telepathic message from them being, "I cannot be seen, I cannot be seen, I must travel by night and exist in darkness. I cannot be seen, I cannot be seen, I cannot be seen." And I felt an enormous wave of compassion for the being rather than fear, which may seem a more logical reaction to someone hearing this story. For some reason, my brain only categorized IT as one thing initially. An outsider worthy of compassion and tolerance. Its skin was pure chalk white, not the skin tone white, the color white. Its eyes were several times larger than ours. It had 2 little air holes for a nose and a very thin mouth. Its frame was completely concealed by its enormous, long, black hooded robe. It looked as though it was quite gaunt underneath, pretty frail looking. It was sitting on its bottom, knees bent, back against the brick front of the rest area to the left of the front doors of the rest area. It was sitting with its back very straight, tall, and erect. It seemed in awe of me, or maybe in awe that I was actually approaching it. It looked vaguely like a human, very vaguely. Its face was snake-like, its eyes were right on me. I threw a little everyday smile in its direction, and then I did something strange. I continued to walk toward the rest area even after seeing it. I walked towards the rest area building, closer to it. I walked forward about 20 feet from the rear of the van to the rest area's steps, up the 20 or so steps, and to the right, where the vending machine was located. My thoughts at this point were very bizarre in retrospect. I felt bad for the thing. I didn't want it to feel different. I know that sounds hilariously quaint if we are indeed talking about an interdimensional being, but I didn't want to run back into the van because I didn't want to hurt its feelings. I didn't want to make it feel like a freak. It had already told me that it could not be seen due to the way people would react, so I wanted it to know that I didn't judge it for the way it looked, and that I was willing to come to terms with its horrific appearance in order to extend some humanity to it. I did not know about fallen angels and such at the time, so it was with that very bizarrely strong conviction to be righteous and humane to IT that I walked toward the vending machine. I actually got pretzels. I'm telling you, my stomach was churning. I used the vending machine with my back to it. Sniders in hand, I swiveled around to look at IT again before descending back down the steps. It was at that moment that pure terror rippled through me. I was closer to it now, approximately 15 feet away, and I could see now that there was definitely no way that it was human. It was staring right at me like a wide-eyed insect. It was still in exactly the same position, except that it had turned its head to look at me better as my position changed. It looked like an alien. It looked like a demon. It was not human. Its huge, one-dimensional eyes. Were they totally black? I'm not sure. But I know that it did not have whites in its eyes. They were almond-shaped, like the classic alien eye that we all know. It was then that I realized that it was extremely fucking tall. Unthinkably tall. Although I was standing and it was sitting, its head still stood taller than mine. Its huge eyes were fixed on me totally, with fascination, alarm, and with the most intense focus. Just like the way my cat looks at something right before she pounces on it. When I had made the decision to climb the stairs towards it and not to retreat to the van, I thought that it was sitting on top of something, and that was why its head was raised up so high. Now, from this closer perspective, I could see that it was not sitting on anything but its own butt. If I had realized that it was this fucking tall at the start, I very well may not have gone up the stairs. So, after the ripple of terror went through me, I responded by smiling the way you smile at a stranger when your eyes catch on the bus. I shot at a casual, thin, innocuous little, "Hey, how you doing?" smile. Why and how I acted as if things were totally fucking normal, I cannot explain. I have never acted so cool in my life. There is a Seinfeld episode when Elaine says that one of the reasons that she is a decent person is because when I see freaks in the street, I never ever stare at them, and yet I'm careful not to look away. See, because I want to make the freaks feel comfortable. So that's actually what was going through my head, believe it or not. If I were to guess what the thing was doing when I encountered it, judging by its body language, I would say that it was somewhat displaced and resting. But I have no clue, maybe it was in the middle of something far more sinister. It did not look like a mutant or an experiment. It looked ancient, timeless, and placeless. Graceful, horrible. It was also firmly in this dimensional when I saw it. It was not a hazy vision in the slightest. The lighting was not dim. It was not even a remotely ethereal experience. The extremely bright lights that illuminated the front facade of the rest area building revealed every contour of this entity. If only I had been closer, I could have provided much more detail about its facial features. As I was walking back to the van, I quickly strategized about how to make sure that my fear did not paralyze me and prohibit me from getting safely inside the car. I decided not to look back or even around me as I turned the key, because if I saw that IT had moved or I saw IT coming towards me, I would have been too terrified to manage with the car keys. I got in the van, I locked the door. I screamed that we needed to leave immediately. We did. As we drove away, about 90 seconds after it was last in my sight, I looked out the window and saw that it was gone. There was nothing where it had been, just brick wall and concrete floor. Story 2. Honkers. When I was 13, I had just come home from school. There was a big storm outside and rain was pouring down. It was around 3 or 4 p.m. and it was still pretty bright out despite the storm clouds. I was making myself a sandwich when a bolt of lightning struck the ground about half a block away from my house. The boom was loud, but immediately following the boom was a human-like screech that gave me shivers. I looked out the window through the rain and could see some kind of animal crawl from a yard to a Jeep that was nearby. I thought, oh crap, a dog must have gotten hit by that bolt. I went up to the window to get a closer look and saw a big orange-red furry thing crawl under the car. It looked like an orangutan. Seriously, it was big and moved like an ape. I saw its arm grasping the side of the Jeep as it crawled under. I took a minute to think about what I just saw and then decided to go try to get a closer look. So I went outside and slowly walked up to the Jeep. When I got to the Jeep, I looked under and saw a glimpse of something orange disappear into a storm drain that the Jeep was parked next to. I noped the fuck out of there. I still have no clue what it was. It screeched like a dying coyote but looked like a giant orangutan. Sewer apes. Story 3. Honkers. I was 16 and woke up in the middle of the night to seeing my clothes being rustled about in my doorway. After washing my clothes, I like to dry them on my doorframe. I notice some really gray, veiny-looking legs, and then I see these really long, pointed sticks moving through my clothes. It took me a second, but my sleepy eyes adjusted to see one of the most grotesque, demon-looking motherfuckers I have ever seen. He was extremely skinny and had a distended stomach. His skin was gray and veiny, and those long sticks were his fingers. His chin was long, his eyes had no lids on them, and were unusually big. His tiny mouth was in a pucker, and moved like he was eating an imaginary lollipop. His hunchback looked as though it tore out of the strange hospital gown he was wearing. He just stared at me, and I tried to scream at my grandmother awake who was sharing a room with me for the weekend. He wouldn't stop staring, and I stared back and tried to shake my grandmother awake. I started noticing other things about him, like how large and cone-like his head was and how hairless and shriveled he looked as he stood still, surprised I could see him. My grandmother woke up, looked towards the door, and he was gone. In the weeks leading to this encounter, I had been experiencing strange things in my house, like my bedroom door slamming and locking on its own. One night I woke up to what felt like several hands touching my feet and legs and horrible nightmares. After the experience with this strange gray man, I told my parents, and they had my room exorcised. IDK. If an exorcism really made those horrible things stop or gave me peace of mind from things I was manifesting myself. All I know is I don't experience those things anymore, and I'll never sleep with a door open again. Story 4. Honkers. My friend worked at a Harrah's casino in Maricopa, Arizona. Anyone familiar with the area knows that this particular casino is out in the middle of nowhere on the Native American reservation. Anyway, my friend is a normal, emotionally stable white guy who is atheist. He was working late around 3 a.m. on the casino floor. He is a night owl, so he was wide awake since this is his normal shift. He is not a drug addict or one to make up bullshit stories. So here he is in this empty casino, walking into the vacant men's bathroom on the opposite side of the casino floor. He walks in, does his business in the urinal, and turns around to go wash his hands when he notices someone standing at the sink, staring into the mirror. He thinks to himself, "That's strange, I didn't even hear anybody walk in." He gets closer to a sink about 5 rows down and begins washing his hands. He glances over again to realize it was not a man that was standing at the sink, but a woman in a red dress. Right when he is about to say something about her using the wrong restroom, this woman turns her head slowly towards him and he just stares at her kind of in disbelief, thinking this chick must be drunk or blind. To not realize she was in the men's bathroom. As her head slowly turns, her eyes were a dark glowing red. He describes it as the red eye you would get when taking a photo of someone. He freaks out, doesn't know what the fuck is happening, and looks down to notice she doesn't have any legs. Instead, she has what he described as the bottom half of a deer for legs, and she was walking on hooves. Anyway, as this thing turns towards him, it starts to move aggressively, and my friend ran out of the bathroom, obviously scared shitless. He had his buddy review the surveillance tape of that area around the bathroom, but all that was seen was him going into the bathroom and then him running out of the bathroom. He may have experienced this. Story 5. Honkers. One night when I was 13 years old, I'd gotten my period for the first time and ended up sleeping on my back. I am an avid side sleeper, so this is a really weird position for me. I was dreaming, and in that dream I was sitting in a chair. I leaned it back on its back legs, and suddenly the chair started to slowly lean further and further back until I drifted into the eternity below me. This freaked me out, and I jolted awake. When I awoke, there was a figure hovering directly above my face, and all I saw was a hooded white, flat ovular, and relatively featureless face with big ovular glassy eyes and an expression like it was determined to devour my eternal soul. The face was humanoid, very two-dimensional, with thin, quivering, angry lips and 2 holes where its nose would be, with eyebrows arched high up onto its forehead. I could feel an unworldly hate burning right through me as it loomed over me. It was absolutely the most helpless I have ever felt and would ever feel, because it was more than just my life I felt was at stake. I tried to move, scream, breathe, anything, and couldn't. It was paralyzing me with its hate. I finally was able to let out the tiniest whimper, and as soon as the sound escaped me, it stood straight up and paced back and forth at the foot of my bed, still staring. It was like a force field was erected around me, and the frustration of it trying to get at me again was radiating throughout the room. It looked like a starving tiger behind glass, longing to lunge at its vulnerable prey, if only it weren't for the barrier between us. It was tall, almost all the way to the ceiling tall and very thin, wearing a long black cloak that covered everything except that terrifying face. I realized that it hadn't been floating over me. It had stood at the foot of my bed and leaned over it to hover its face over mine. I sat up in my bed, still frozen, just staring at it. My closet door behind it was cracked a few inches, and it swooped in there and peered out at me, never having broken eye contact. It continued to stare, quivering with hate and frustration until it slowly faded away. I turned my light on, and it stayed on at night for a long time. I never slept with that closet door open again, and I didn't sleep again that night. I stayed the night in the living room with all of the lights on, just sitting on the couch. I later dismissed it as sleep paralysis for several years. It was a very believable and plausible explanation. Then I became friends with a girl who confided in me and told me a story. She was up late at night by herself with her door open. Something out in the living room by the kitchen caught her eye, and when she looked at it, she saw a figure standing there, beckoning her to approach it. She looked away, refocused on it, and it was still there. When she described it, she described the exact same creature that had attacked me. We each got a sketchbook and drew what we saw, and when she showed me hers, I was staring at my attacker all over again. She had never heard my story before telling hers. Story 6. Honkers. I'm 18. My dad is dying. I'm home alone taking care of the house and my little brother. My dad is in the hospital wasting away. At this point, he's got like a 50% chance of making it. I'm sleeping in my parents' bed while they are away at the hospital. I'm sleeping alone. I'm laying on my side facing the door and a figure is just there. But seeing him isn't frightening in itself. He looks weird. Reddish skin, black eyes, black trench coat, that I could maybe not shit myself over. But the way you feel when you see him, that's what terrifies you. This pit in your stomach like you have to present something in front of the whole school. Except there is a gunman at the school and he'll shoot you if you do it wrong. Like that. Except worse. I once told a friend, you know what it feels like when all is right in the world? That inner peace and happiness? It's the direct inverse of that, and it is. He's standing in my parents' doorway, and I feel like I'm gonna puke. I blink and he's gone. Whatever. Bad dream. A couple of days later. Again. I see him. He is one single step closer. Same feelings. Same dread, terror. This continues for some time. Always a single step. Never more, never less. Well, eventually he makes it to the bedside. And I thought I couldn't feel any worse. But it was actually possible to feel worse. He bends unilaterally, to the side. He bends to the side in the same manner that the rest of the world would bend over. Rotating his spine to the side 90 degrees, his face is now facing to face with mine. Like we were two lovers post-coitus or some shit. But it doesn't feel like that. Then the smile. The smile makes him look insane, but content. He knows something I don't know. Then a few days later, my dad died. Nothing dramatic like he flatlined or something when it happened. But he did go. Then I saw the man again, and one last time. Each time within less than 2 weeks, someone I knew died. If there is any interest, I will post the other stories of me seeing him. It's just hard to talk about because it makes me cry. The second time, this one is the hardest for me to talk about, because I feel like I caused it. It had been a couple of years since my dad died. I was married and living with a man. We got pregnant. I wasn't sure I wanted it. I waxed and waned. Well, lo and behold, he shows up. I knew then. I knew what was going to happen and I would get hysterical. I would wake up and he would be there in the doorway. And all I could do is look at him and cry. Then close my eyes and he's gone. Repeat ad nauseum. But it was different because at this point I was married. I had someone that could watch me, hear something, or at least see it. He got closer and closer. I became more paranoid, very upset. I felt like I was a crazy person. What was wrong with me? The doctor blamed it on hormones. I got all the way to the second trimester. He was closer in his path to me, but I saw him less and less. I had begun to think that he was just a figment of my imagination, and that I was having some other issue accepting the baby. Then when he got close enough, he hovered one hand above my belly. It wasn't all weird like he sat it in the air there, but it was like he was going to touch me. But I closed my eyes and he was gone before he could make contact with my skin. 4 days later, I go into early labor. The baby died. Last time, hopefully. I have a few kids by now. It's been years. There he is. Different house, same MO in the doorway, but this one felt quicker. He came every single night. I was angry and scared, but it didn't feel as intimate. In a way, it felt like he took the worst he could take from me. Is he just gonna take everything? Fine, fucking take it and stop with the theater. I was worried, but just angrier. It's like a curse. And I wasn't gonna be like I was last time. I was made stronger from that, and I wasn't just gonna let it happen to me. I told some friends, and of course they didn't believe me until I told them face to face. I told everyone I could. I wanted to know what he is. What does he do? Is there a name for him? All the while he is coming closer, but it didn't feel like I was a trapped fawn waiting for the hunter to kill me. I felt a sense of empowerment. During the day, at night when he would come, the crying would just start. And those feelings, like everything in the world is wrong, nothing is right, and it never will be. A week later, my aunt, who I wasn't close to, climbed a construction crane and killed herself. She jumped. If you lived in the Denver area in 2010-ish, plus or minus a year, then you would have heard about it on the news. So that brings us here. 5 years later, I haven't seen him again. I've talked about him a lot. Never met a person who's seen him too. Hence my excitement.
Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.